Okay, and we're live, it looks like. I think there will be a little bit of a lag between StreamYard and YouTube, but they should see it now. Yeah, I see it. And welcome, everybody. This is the SOP 2025 Town Hall. We're going to hear from Tim Bako and Venkatesh Rao, who are the directors of the program. They're going to give everybody an overview of what we have in store this year, what tracks we want to give out, a sci-fi contest. I won't spoil too much of it for you, but I'll briefly introduce myself as well. My name's Timber. I'm helping coordinate the program. If you send an email or are in the Discord, which I highly recommend you join, you'll probably hear from me. But with that, I'll hand it over to Tim, who's going to give a bit of a history of the program and talk about what we are thinking for this year.
Thanks, Timber. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. So as Timber was saying, I'll start by giving us a history of Summer protocols, why and how the Ethereum Foundation is involved in this. And then after me, Venkat will walk through the specifics of what we have planned for 2025. So the sort of genesis story for Summer of Protocols is that a few years ago in 2022, I reached out to Venkat because as part of my work where I facilitate protocol upgrades to Ethereum, I wasn't sure how to think of I wasn't sure how to think about what is the right way to structure this? How do you actually work with protocols? For example, if you work in product development or software engineering, or if you run a startup, there's all these frameworks, these mental models that you can use to kind of frame your work and reason about what you're doing and hopefully improve what you're doing. And it felt that Ethereum didn't quite fit into any of those buckets, right? Obviously, it is like a software artifact. The protocol is instantiated through code, but there's also this money aspect to it, right? Which is a very important part of the protocol that's very distinct from many other software products or protocols. And then when you look at what types of things people build on Ethereum, a lot of these things are closer to utilities or financial products that you'd expect at the scale of a nation state, things like IDs or things like payments and whatnot. And so I really didn't feel like we had a good kind of mental model for how to approach this, and I was hoping Venkat could help me think through this. So we started talking about this, and very quickly, we converged on this idea that the best way to think about what's special about Ethereum and potentially learn more was through the lens of it being a protocol. We formalized our thinking around all of this in an original paper that we published called The Unreasonable Sufficiency of Protocols. So Venkat, myself, and other people working at the Ethereum Foundation kind of thought about what's actually special or unique about protocols for a few months and tried to put that together in a concise way in this post. And then we had the concern that we might be overfitting to Ethereum. Or the kind of thesis that we had was there's probably something true, that protocols are specials regardless of their domains, and there's things we can learn about them. And if we learn things at a higher level than just Ethereum, we might be able to apply those lessons back. But we didn't really have a way to validate this. And that's actually how Summer Protocols came to be. Or the idea that we came up with was, for the summer of 2023, we'll fund a bunch of researchers in many different domains, ranging from architecture to software to law and a bunch of other fields, and have them study protocols related to their domain to try and see, can we actually derive something, a sort of common thread across all of their observations? So there's this meme of the blind man and the elephant, and everyone touching a different part of the elephant and seeing a different thing. So our kind of approach in 2023 was can we get different people from different fields touching different parts of the elephant, and then hopefully it'll start to draw out a common shape for what a protocol is and what's special about them. So we did that in the first year, and we were quite happy with the results. We had all of these write-ups, all of these artifacts that we put together into this protocol kit. And while that validated our initial assumption, it also still felt slightly different from what the actual work of improving protocols was. So last year, we decided to go from theory to practice and instead of funding people just looking and observing protocols, we wanted to fund people actually working with protocols and trying to drive change in them. So we had a bunch of different teams, again, in domains ranging from like shoreline adaptations for flooding to wildfire prevention to encryption and communication protocols, and had them all kind of work towards improving their protocol and trying to derive whether there was a more applied practice out of this work that we could generalize. And so one of the big reasons like this has been really important and why the EF kind of cares about it is that this protocol's framing has helped us better think about what Ethereum is in relation to other things, and what the points of like what the points of like commonality and differences are. And sorry, for some reason my slide didn't render perfectly here, but you could imagine that, you know, in this case, Ethereum, the Ethereum protocol is this green Swiss Army knife, and you know, all the Swiss Army knives obviously have a knife, so you have these different protocols that are similar, but there's other things in other protocols, and so something like similar protocols kind of allows us to learn like what are these other affordances that exist, and you know, are there things we should be doing or thinking about differently in how we approach Ethereum. So for example, these other Swiss Army knives have like bottle openers, and the Ethereum Swiss Army knife doesn't in this case. And I think another way in which this has been helpful is that a lot of times when we work in like the blockchain or crypto space, people get very fixated on this token or like economic or price aspect of it. And this slide say this is the little scissor on the Ethereum Swiss Army knife, which other protocols don't have. And I think framing the conversation around what a protocol is has helped kind of abstract this away, meaning that we can collaborate and learn from people in completely different fields who don't really care about like the money aspect of Ethereum or crypto, and you know, even in some cases feel like this is something they disagree with or straight up dislike. Through this like protocols framing, we're at least able to have like a very practical and fruitful conversation with these domains. So at a high level, like this is the thing we're trying to get at. Like, can we build bridges and kind of create a shared language going way beyond crypto, where we can discuss kind of these affordances and features of protocols? And it's already starting to be helpful. So last year at our developer conference, I gave a talk about some of the learnings we've had out of this work, and you know, we've started to see that there's different ways to think about, say, how protocols get adopted in the world. How do you measure their impact? How do you actually evaluate what's a good versus a bad protocol? What are the better models of stewardship for protocols? And what are some practical definitions of protocols we can work with to help us reason through some of the more complicated edge cases? And the last thing I'll say is that at the EF level, another thing we've been focused on in an increasing capacity is thinking about how do we export not only Ethereum as a sort of product or technology, but also the sort of values and reference points that we have in our thinking in very different domains. So as I explained, Summer Protocols is a way to which we do that, but there's also other efforts we've been working on over these past couple of years. One that started recently is this idea of DAC, or distributed accelerationism, as kind of a counter to the narratives around you know, either accelerationism or decelerationism that came up through the AI community. The idea with DAC is thinking about like, okay, is there some middle path where you don't want just reckless acceleration of all technologies, but you also can't have this like Luddite view that progress is not going to happen or you're going to somehow stop progress. And are there some technologies that we think are actually valuable to accelerate in a way that helps the world be better prepared for the adoption, so that, you know, don't create like huge dependencies on centralized entities, and help with people in like a more defensive capacity. And some of these things can sound quite benign, like just, you know, better air filtration and like air quality monitoring. And some of them are more kind of crypto native, like thinking about, okay, can we have cryptographically represented identity schemes that allow that provide privacy to individuals, but still allow to create like proofs about different parts of your identity. And another complement to this has been what started as Zuzalu and is now called Edge City, but this idea of creating literal physical environments where we bring people from different communities and have them kind of live together and learn from each other. So Zuzulu was this first experiment where there was a bunch of crypto people, but also people from, say, the longevity field, AI, other different disciplines, all trying to come together and like co-create a city for a while. And now this has grown far beyond the EF. Edge City is its own independent thing, but it is a great example of the types of initiatives we like to support, because we think that not only do they use Ethereum in some types of ways, but more importantly, they really try and like push some of these values and ways of thinking that we have in very different contexts. And the reason I wanted to share this before we get into the details of the program is that, yes, the Ethereum Foundation is the sponsor for this year. And yes, we have like some interest in this, but I hope that like this conveyed that the interest is at a very high and general level. We're not expecting you to try and like add Ethereum and like find some weird blockchain use case for every single thing you talk about. We care far more about, can we derive some sort of common understanding of protocols, of which Ethereum is an instance, but this higher level class is the thing we're really focused on and want to push forward. So with that, I'll hand it over to, I believe, Timber or Venkat to talk more about the details of the summer's program.
Thanks, Tim. So I'll go into some details about what we have planned for this year. And right now, so we've got 3 main tracks happening this year, and they are education, scene making, and technical foundations. So for education, the goal of that track is at a low level to take all the research from the past 2 years and transform it into curriculums that people can deliver at universities or online, or course modules or short standalone courses. We found that the body of knowledge that we've developed is like kind of at the PhD level, where it's not exactly accessible. The protocol reader is really, really long. It's full of great stuff, but it does take a dedicated weekend to sit down and read it, which is quite the time commitment. Then we have scene making. So recently we moved our weekly publication of Protocolized over from Paragraph to Substack. We've turned it into more of a magazine that's a blend of science fiction and science fact, kind of taking some inspiration from Astounding Magazine back in the day and Nature. So there we have short stories. We even publish AI generated short stories. We have one coming out next week. We're big on finding out better protocols for writing. And that has already grown to 1,600 subscribers, which is like I think a 60% increase in the last month, which is awesome to see. We also are giving out some small grants to support meetups about protocol fiction and protocol studies. If you want to organize one, it's kind of like a 2 pizza team sort of funding mechanism we have there. So we'll sponsor some light catering. And then lastly, technical foundations. We've got a series of workshops starting with Klongs and Subaks, which I'll let Venkat get into more detail, but the deadline for that is today. Highly recommend you apply if you're in Southeast Asia. We do have some folks over there. So at a high level, that's the technical logistics of SoP 2025, kind of the programming, and I'll hand it over to Venkat to talk more about the philosophy of the program at a high level, understand how we've come to get here, where we're going with it, what does go big and go home mean? Is that not just a paradox? Can you actually do both?
All right, thanks, Timber. And speaking of fun with protocols, on my calendar, this actually showed up as 9 o'clock. I don't know why, some daylight savings thing. But yeah, what do we mean by go big and go home? So a research program like this, at some point you have to ask yourself, like, do we just keep expanding the program, looking for more funding, adding more researchers, taking on more projects, and at some point you are running a big organization and you incorporate and just keep growing. And somehow that doesn't seem like the right answer for a program about protocols. Because in some ways, protocols are an alternate organization technology. and it seems ironic if we were to do that. But on the other hand, the work here is not done. We've been working at this for 2 years, and the more we study protocols, the more we realize just how vast the landscape is and how much more there is to be done. So you do have to go big as well. You can't just say it's a job well done and let's go back to the Ethereum ecosystem and focus on our narrow problems. So our solution to that is to try and create something like a network of activity where a lot of people who are interested in working on protocols are sort of like independently carrying on strands. So we've had some success with that, with some of the things we've built up, stuff we've done at Edge City, stuff that we're doing with the Protocolized magazine, which we'll talk about. So our solution to go big and go home is to build a decentralized network, basically. So it's a little bit of a dog food principle. So apply our own thinking about protocols to scaling the study of protocols. Timber, are you advancing the slides? Next slide, please. Okay, yeah. So quick inventory. Tim gave you a glimpse of that, but this is the state of play 2 years in. So we have 70 odd program alumni across the world. If you go to our website and you look on the research tab, you'll see like 100+ items. You've got like essays, you've got short stories, you've got pieces of artwork, you've got lots of material to work with. And it might sound arrogant, but we think if you go there and look, you'll find some research that's relevant to nearly anything you might want to think about, because protocols are this very general concept. And we've published a lot of this research in the form of what we've called the protocol kit. That's the 3-ring binder that many of you have. And we've got this ebook that we just put together based on the main essays. So I highly recommend using that as your sort of starting point if you're new to this whole thing. We've got a thriving community going, 1,500 subscribers for our newsletter. But this is not just a newsletter. This is like a network of people who are actively interested in thinking about and building with protocols. So I really think of it as like the beginnings of a scene. And money is, I think, always a good measure, so long as you interpret it right. We have spent over $2 million on this, and it's reasonable to ask what have we got to show for it, and what does it get us going into the future. I think we do have $2 million worth of stuff. I think we haven't yet fully realized the value of what we can do with it, but we have actually got the value. And we've got like, this is probably the part that interests me most. It's like one thing to explore ideas and write about them, but if you want to like turn that into a living field, you kind of have to develop methodologies, right? It's the whole give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, teach a man to fish, and he'll eat for a lifetime. That's how you go from like 2 years of people doing research to kind of like a self-sustaining thing. And we have a lot of interesting methodologies. So if you want to work on protocols, analyze them, design them, like, you know, test them for like failure modes, things like that. We have a lot of methodologies for you, and we've kind of mapped out the frontier of important problems. And number 10 is probably my favorite. I think if you invent a language for talking about a new subject, that's really kind of half the battle won. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please, Timber. Okay, yeah, so that big list of like stuff we have, I think isn't, oh, is this my latest? Actually, hold on, I thought I updated the slide. Give me a second. Actually, Timber, why don't you stop sharing? I'll start sharing mine instead.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I think I made some last minute updates. Where is this? There we go. There we go. I'll maximize that. Everybody see my screen? Okay, yeah. So the way I would summarize this sort of like grab bag of stuff that we have is in the first year, we really spent a lot of time just exploring what are protocols. So we had a lot of arguments over definitions, over scope. Is this a protocol or not? We had a lot of phenomenology. So all these terms you'll hear if you start participating in the program, which allows you to think about protocols. And the interesting thing is this never actually goes away. Like we find that people who join the protocols conversation, they always end up spending time I'm wondering what are protocols? What's the definition? Is this or is this not a protocol? That's the bad news. And it might feel like we're circling the same questions. But the good news is it seems to take less and less time each year. So the first year, I think we spent the whole summer arguing about this. The second year, we got it down to 2 days. Like now, if you give me 2 days, I'm confident I can like explain what protocols are in a way that allows you to move on and do things with them. And I'm sure Timber can as well, and Tim can as well, and many of our alumni can as well. So that's progress, right? When you can go from taking 3 months to scoping out the what of a new subject to 2 days, we want to get it down to 5 minutes. Like we want to like have like a very clean, efficient, what we call a pill, right? You heard of like red pills, black pills, that kind of thing. We want like an efficient pill that allows us to like very quickly convey to people what are protocols, how do you think about whether or not something is a protocol, and why is that interesting? So we're headed there. We're not yet there yet. 2024, I would say the focus was on how. So we had a bunch of grants that were about improving protocols. That was the main grants program. And we had a whole bunch of people exploring real world protocols and how to improve them, like how to fight wildfires, how to manage flooding in climate risk zones. And the important thing is I mentioned methodologies on the last slide, but we actually started like getting concrete tooling. So one of the methodologies that we're really happy with is what we call the tensions game. If you look in Protocolize, you'll see an essay about it. But we hope more such techniques start to get into our toolkit of tools. So we have a library of materials, but we also want a toolkit of tools. So we have what and how. 2025, we really want to like explore the question why. Like, why should you care about protocols, right? I mean, what makes it interesting and fascinating to nerd out over hand washing and climate protocols and blockchains and TCP/IP? For some people, they don't need to ask that question. They just have the mentality where they're like, all right, this is just nerdy, interesting stuff. I will go in. But I think for us to realize like the true potential of the subject, you kind of need better answers to why. And this is the reason we've made teaching and education the core focus of this year, because this is my experience, and I suspect a lot of you as well. What you remember about really great teachers is that, yes, they teach you about the what and how of a subject. They teach you like some facts. They teach you some methods of like working with those facts. But really, they help you figure out why should you care. Like think about a really influential teacher in high school or a professor in college whose lectures kind of like suddenly made a light bulb go off and you said, this is what I want to spend the rest of my life doing. That's kind of like you found an answer to why you should care about something in a way that makes it your reason for life, right? So great teachers do that, but I think the other elements of our program this year also get at the why of you should care about protocols. So science fiction is a big focus. So we rebooted our newsletter Protocolized to be more focused on science fiction. And there's a reason. If you look at the history of the last century, lots of important and hugely impactful fields, they got established because really good and imaginative fiction writers told really compelling stories about these things. So we've taken a lot of inspiration from Astounding Magazine. That was the classic magazine that established modern science fiction in the golden age of 1930s, 40s. And we kind of want to do something like that for what we're calling protocol fiction. So we think of it as a subgenre of science fiction. We wrote an article about it a few weeks ago in Protocolized. You should read that. It's called, what's it called? Strange New Rules. So it's like allusion to Strange New Worlds from Star Trek. I was really happy with the framework we came up there. So science fiction, another way to answer the question, why should you care? And the third is, this is more for people who have some taste and interest in like mathematics and logical foundations of things. Like I'm an engineer by training and several people in the program are, but this is not necessarily just for technical people. anytime you find like really elegant, sort of like foundational and general ways of thinking about a subject, you actually automatically get an answer to the question, why should you care? So if you look at the history of economics, for example, like 2 centuries ago, there wasn't really a thing called economics. It was just commerce. There were traders who were going about buying and selling stuff. It was kind of like there was no intellectual culture associated with commerce, right? And then Adam Smith came up with his invisible hand theory. Then over a century of work, we came up with general equilibrium theory, game theory. It took about 170 years to get from untheorized commerce to now a truly fascinating intellectual field. And for a lot of people, spending their whole life thinking and working in economics is kind of the answer to the question of why they're alive. And we hope it doesn't take 170 years to do it for us. We can hopefully do it in 17 years, like speed run this. But that's why we want to have a track on foundational technical things. We want to find these beautiful and elegant ideas that really capture the pleasure of a subject. So 3 sort of vectors of addressing the why you should care question. Okay, so quick hints of where to look for the first 2 questions answers. So to catch up on the what of protocols, just read our book. It's amazing, 358 pages, all the essays from the first year, which was all the what questions. And I'm honestly really proud of this book that we put together. I've been part of lots of publishing projects. This is by far one of my favorites. So read this book. Honestly, if you do nothing else this year, and even if this year's programs and activities are not for you, just read this book. I think you'll love it. To get up to speed on the how, so learning this growing discipline of techniques, methodologies, real world practice. How do you go into a field, look at the world around you, understand what you're seeing, unpack the protocols, analyze it, synthesize some changes to improve it. Watch our videos. We have 2 years worth of videos, maybe about 50, 60. And Timber, if you can look, you can post the number in the chat maybe. But especially the 6 core talks from the research of last year. So the screenshot here: fire protocols, autonomous realities, plurality, shoreline adaptations, arc generative communities. These all go deep into how to actually work in a real world protocol domain. It's not toys. It's not spending 5 minutes bullshitting about handshake protocols, which we've all done a lot of. This is about really go out there and do the equivalent of startup type entrepreneurship with protocols. So we've started calling it protocol entrepreneurship. And if you want to learn protocol entrepreneurship, watch our videos. We have a ton of material. But okay, this year we want to answer the question why, and we don't have an answer yet. So if you want to help us figure out why, join the 2025 program in some way. I'll walk you through some of the available options. But I want to share this quote. I've been thinking a lot about the so-called meaning crisis. And this might, again, sound arrogant, but I honestly think protocols are the answer with the meaning crisis. And I'm working on an essay that I'll put out on Protocolize probably in the next few weeks. But this quote by Viktor Frankl, paraphrasing Nietzsche, you might have heard of it before, right? He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And protocols are really a how technology. So yes, there's a what and a how and a why of studying protocols, but protocols themselves, traffic rules, blockchains, or whatever, they're a how, right? They're an instrument. They don't automatically include a why. But working with protocols gets you towards certain types of answers to the why of life itself. And in that sense, I think this year's work is super important, because if we succeed in finding really good answers to the why question, these why should you care questions, I think we'll actually make a dent in the meaning crisis, and that would be amazing, right? Okay, so drilling down into the actual program opportunities, I'll go very quickly through this because this is all in the overview essay we put out. It's on the website. Just go to the call for applications and stuff. But yeah, the main core is curriculum development grants. We have a total pool of $500,000 plus a little bit more money from this group we partnered with last year and will again this year, called the Global Chinese Community. So they are specifically interested in funding curriculum development in the Chinese language or from a Chinese perspective. So yeah, we've got quite a nice little pool of money. We want to do 6 to 8 grants with the full-time summer commitment to develop entire courses. So if you want to come up with a Protocols 101 course, that's the grant you should apply for. This one we want to restrict to people who are already at existing institutions, universities. We might consider high schools, but probably not appropriate. This is really, at the moment, a university level subject. And module grants is what we call like a portion of a course on protocols. So for example, say you're teaching a course about sustainability or teaching a course about like AI safety, and you want to like introduce a sequence of 3 or 4 lectures that talk about protocols in a particular way as part of your larger course, that would be a module grant. And we think of that as like a 1/3 time commitment through the summer to develop this. This grant you can also apply for if you are an online educator. So if you have a track record as a successful online course creator, please do apply. We would love to see versions of this material go out there on like, Teachable and all those other online platforms where people can apply protocols thinking to lots of other stuff, right? And it can be about protocols directly, or it can be about like protocols for health or protocols for productivity. My buddy Tiago tweeted about this program, and he's got like a whole bunch of material on productivity, and he thinks annual review processes are a kind of protocol. So that would be a great subject as well. So that's curriculum development grants, and roughly calibrate as whatever you make in a year. What does 3 months of effort look like for you? That's a course grant. About a month of effort. That's really, so summer as 3 months is how we're thinking. So calibrate as that. There's a place in the form where you can like list what you think what level of funding it will take you to do this. Applications are due April 1st. The only real requirement is you have to attend a week-long workshop in California at the end of May, where we'll get together and really like hash this out. Then you go back to wherever you live and work over the summer to develop your course materials. And key point here, we would like any material you develop to be published open source, and you should be using each other's materials and distributing them to other teachers. So really, we want to like create a repository of educational materials. The other piece, I'll just briefly mention it. I did the first ever corporate workshop on protocols last month at a major insurance company, and it was a lot of fun. And we kind of want to make a thing of it. So if you are at a company that could use protocols as a new business competency, as a way to like improve your business, talk to us. We'll do a pro bono workshop for you. Like we'll start with a 1-hour virtual salon, and if you want to put together like a in-person workshop, we'll help you, and we'll do this pro bono. We just want to spread the gospel. We have got the evangelical fervor here, but yeah, check out that workshops link. All right, so the second prong of our program is scene making, and the core of this is protocolized magazine. So until last year, it was just a regular updates on the program type newsletter where we were talking about like scheduled events and stuff. This year, we are like really trying to make this proper magazine, and like I said, our inspiration is classic science fiction magazines like Astounding. So this is actually pretty decent pay. Those of you who've written online for publications, this number should strike you as like more than you get at most places. And what's interesting is we kind of want to bet big on LLMs. So most places will tell you not to write with LLMs. We are telling you experiment away, and if you can do very clever things with LLMs, do that. But the big focus is protocol fiction, and since this is a new kind of new genre, we kind of want to help seed the scene around it. So if you want to run a protocol fiction workshop where you get a bunch of friends together to like brainstorm how to write with LLMs, what ideas to write about as protocol fiction, let us know, and we'll pay for pizza at your meetup. And if you guys produce good stuff, we'll publish it on Protocolized. So we already did this. We did 2 workshops in Austin last month, and they went great. I was at one of them. The other one was as part of South by Southwest and Edge Austin. And yes, general interest nonfiction also invited. So think of it as like popular science or Make magazine, that level of audience. So we want to create a scene around skills and ideas as well, not just stories. One sort of like more focused thing we're doing as part of that is this is a contest we are running with deadline on April 14th. So you've got maybe 3-4 weeks to work on a story here. if you want to like jumpstart and prime the pump on protocol fiction, and we had a little brainstorm internally, and it struck us that one of the most fun and interesting ways to come up with a story idea about protocols is to take a technical term like, packet switching or chain of custody. Cap and trade is a term from climate. Zero knowledge proof is from the crypto world. All these terms, they have like specific technical meanings, but if you think of them as, all right, that's a premise for a story, you end up going in unexpected directions. So that's the challenge. There's more details on the website. Pick a term and write a story about bringing out unexpected aspects of this. And I should mention that here we have a particular definition of science fiction in mind. We think of science fiction as being about strange rules. So worlds where the rules of physics or whatever are different. In this case, it doesn't have to be like fantasy, or sorry, impossible science fiction like time travel or something. It could be as simple as, in the future, autonomous cars are all over and nobody parks and they're just hovering all the time waiting to find rights, right? That's a protocol. So strange rules about a future world where a particular protocol is operating in an interesting way. That's the theme. If you have a good story idea, and yes, you can use LLMs, it's encouraged. You have to document that, though. You have to put the recipe that you cooked with at the end of your contribution. But yeah, due April 14th, 3 prizes, 2,500, 1,500, and 1,000. Plus the top 10 entries, the remaining 7, we might commission your story anyway at the $750 rate. So you're excited about this. We'll see how it goes. Technical foundations. This is the sort of like most least developed track because we're just dipping our toe in. But the starting point in our search for general foundations is going to be this workshop we're doing in Bangkok next month. Today is actually the last day to apply. So if you are interested, please apply in the next 12 hours or so. The form will close at midnight. But this is going to be in Bangkok, April 21st to 25th. And we're going to be looking at distributed AI crossed with blockchains. What can you do with that, specifically from a Southeast Asian perspective? And the goal is, you want to start with something specific and regional, and then from there try to bootstrap to things like game theory or general equilibrium theory in economics. We don't want to like start with abstract general bullshit that's not grounded in anything. We want to start somewhere real. And in fall, if this workshop goes well and we start to build body of ideas to work with, in fall we are hoping to do what we're calling a basket of protocols workshop, which is going to be you've heard the concept of basket of goods in economics, right? So that's how inflation is measured. You've got a basket of goods that most of us buy, and the price of those goods, how it goes up and down, is the measure of inflation. And it's like a very interesting link between the empirical side of economics and the theoretical side, right? So we want to like try and do something similar with protocols. So what is common between blockchains and climate protocols, and how you shake hands, and healthcare, vaccine protocols, things like that? Well, one way to find out is to put a dozen such protocols in a basket and think about what are the general principles here. Can I write down a single game theory style model that in some interesting way models all of these things, right? So we want to get at those things. So if you are in an appropriate academic field, or by yourself you've been researching this sort of thing, stay in touch with the program. We'll have more about this probably late in summer, and we'll announce this. And if you're interested in traveling to Southeast Asia and applying for this, please do. Okay, so for all of this, your primary resource is our Discord. Timber will put the link in the comments, so please join there. We have like channels for the short story writing. We have channels for our research stuff. We've got a lot of the old conversations from 2024 in there, so you can like browse the archives. So there's lots of good resources here. So please join our Discord if you want to keep up with the program. Okay, so that's all the new stuff. Also want to quickly talk through the activities we have ongoing to keep building on our old stuff, right? So all alumni, we like to stay in touch with them. We like to give opportunities to them to continue participating. We like to support their work. So if you're an alumnus or alumna of either of the last 2 years and you're interested in coming to our protocol week at Edge Esmeralda, get in touch. We'll have a limited number of spots for alumni, and we're actually hoping alumni from previous years can help the new cohort trying to develop course materials in particular, help them with that process. But also, if you're doing new research on protocols, tell us about it and maybe write an essay for Protocolized. If you're going to a conference somewhere and you're participating or talking about protocolish themes, and it's a field where the ideas from protocol studies could do some good, get in touch. Maybe we can fund you to be our ambassador at that event. We're already doing that a little bit in Southeast Asia. We appointed our first ambassador, Sam Chua. So he's traveling usually all over the place in Southeast Asia, going to various events. So he's going to be our ambassador. So if you are in Southeast Asia and at any event and you see Sam Chua, say hello and have a chat with him about protocols. Okay, and the other big thing, this is probably the lowest effort way for you to keep up with this field and stay plugged in. We have a weekly salons track every year. It's called the Protocol Town Hall, and it kicks off next week for this year. So we've got a whole bunch of interesting speakers already lined up. So those of you who are like scientific computing or Python programmers, you've probably heard of Anaconda, which is the Python sort of like scientific computing environment. So the founder of that, Peter Wang, who actually now leads AI work at Anaconda, he's going to be our kickoff speaker. Then we'll have John Asconas, who wrote a great essay about the new control society. He'll be next. We don't yet have an April 9th speaker. Then we'll have Sriram from EigenLayer, which is a really sophisticated and interesting blockchain technology that's been growing really rapidly. April 23rd, we'll probably do a session streaming live from Thailand, from the Thai workshop. So not yet clear what that'll be. And April 30th, we will have Emmett Shear, the founder of Twitch. And for a couple of days, he was the CEO of OpenAI as well. So that's our ongoing tracks. Quick mention, we're always looking for interesting institutions to partner with in some way. We had a few such partnerships last year. We want to do more this year. This is what we mean by, the go big and go home idea of like, build a network. We don't want to be the only program working on protocols. We want like a network of like a couple of dozen threads of activity going on in various places. So if you want to be one of those threads, get in touch. We can get you set up and started. Okay. So that's sort of the contents of the program. I want to say a little bit about the philosophy part. I already kind of like hinted at it. But okay, so why are we doing all this stuff in the program? Yes, we are answering the why question. We are trying to like do the go big and go home at the same time approach. But also we have to ask like, why is this important now in 2025? And this phrase is our motto for the year, accelerating order. It's sort of the flip side of like, accelerating chaos. So lots of stuff happening in the world, things falling apart, lots of forces of chaos, but not so many forces of order sort of like competing with those forces of chaos. So that's why we think what we're doing this year is important. And one way I like to really think about this, there's a diagram I made for an essay a few weeks ago, but there's this famous quote by the political philosopher Antonio Gramsci, which says the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. So this is my visualization of that quote. In between the old world dying and the new world struggling to be born, you've got these monsters, and it feels like stressful, anxiety-inducing chaos all around us. I call that the Gramsci gap. And we talked about like if you have a why, like Viktor Frankl says, you can put up with almost any how. And the putting up with the almost anything part is we're in a time of monsters, and you kind of need really strong answers to the question of the why of life in order to like make the how worth dealing with. So that's sort of the broader philosophical goal here. And if you try to like drill down a little bit, the old world is dying part is easy. We've got like AI exploding all over the place, and sort of like it's a force of chaos. Whatever your actual philosophy of AI, it is a really disruptive, deranging kind of force. Climate is another; it just gets worse and worse every year. And this year, yeah, the political world is like retreating from doing anything about it. And the third one is, of course, the war over state capacity as we think of it. So it's most visible in the US, but you also see it in Argentina and other parts of the world, where without getting into the politics of it, there is a lot of difference of opinion on what's the industrial world. Is it worth anything? Should we tear it apart and build something new? How should we think about government and its role in society? Are we headed towards a post-state world? All that is what I call the war over state capacity. So protocols, of course, are like any technology, they're political, but they're a particularly political technology, right? When you say climate protocols, when you say blockchains, when you say AI safety protocols, you're talking about extremely consequential things in economic, cultural, and political terms. So there's no way to not be political when working on protocols. So we don't want to be naive here. We don't want to pretend that this program is apolitical or outside of politics. We think of this program as what we call politics aware. Right? All of us working on the program, we have our political opinions and biases, and anybody who participates will have their opinions and biases. And what we want to do is use protocols as a way to kind of like make the political awareness be a truly creative force that helps us build the new world, as opposed to like participating in killing the old world. So we want to be on the creative side of this dying and living or dying and struggling to be born equation. So what's the new world is struggling to be born part? You've got protocols are actually worlds. If you read Sarah Friend's essay, Good Death, it makes this argument very closely. It's in the ebook, so it's worth reading. So protocols are worlds. So when you say a new world is struggling to be born, and if it does get born and evolves and matures, what you'll have is a new set of protocols. So protocols are worlds. Protocols also provide the what and how of world. Like if you imagine a science fictional future and whatever you see in your mind's eye, that tends to actually be a set of protocols, like how do people live, how do they work, how do they get to work, how do they eat, right? Lots of protocols is how we imagine the future. But interestingly, and I mentioned this before, protocols by themselves do not provide the answer to the why of worlds. Like why should we care? Like who gives a shit if the old world gets torn apart and all these forces are like allowed to run unchecked? Why should we build an accelerating order that can compete with this accelerating chaos, right? The protocols aren't the answer, but even choosing to look for answers through protocols says a lot about like what sorts of answers you're looking for, right? If you want to say, all right, right now the educational world is under severe threat in the US, for example, which is one of the reasons we decided to go with curriculum grants. But then you have to ask, what do you want the world of education to look like? Like after these troubled times in 10 years, if universities are still around, what should they look like? How should education be delivered? How should young people come into the world with what sorts of preparation? You can have different answers to that, right? Like one possible answer is education is crap. You should just throw them out in the world to like, fight each other to bloody death. And you have this Hobbesian world of like people growing up in a world of violence, which is much of history. Or you could say, no, we do need education, and there are ways to like systematically help people mature into adult citizens in the world. That's a protocolish answer. And the fact that you look in that direction as opposed to like, Lord of the Flies kind of approach to education says something about your answers to the question of the why of life, right? So this is sort of ill-formed, and as with the past 2 years, it'll take maybe the whole summer for us to like have discussions and like refine this thinking, but hopefully we'll exit the summer with a set of good answers and good ways to like communicate those answers to people who will learn. So that's that's my last slide. So hopefully you'll find some part in the program to join us and look for these answers, right? So we've got about 7 minutes left on the hour, so I'll stop sharing. And Timber, perhaps you can curate any questions.
Yeah, we had a couple. And if people have more questions, go ahead and fire them in the chat. I'll read them out loud. I believe the first one was pretty general. It's kind of not specifically about protocols, but maybe a good warm-up question. What do you think the optimal length is to communicate a concept?
I think it depends on the purpose of communicating the concept, right? So like you heard the classic concept of an elevator pitch. And the reason that works is if you want to convince the CEO of a company to give you $1 million to work on a project and you boil it down to like a 30-second elevator pitch and it's compelling, that's the answer. But if you want to teach somebody how to work with the technology and like, I don't know, write complicated programs or train people or like, do anthropological research to figure out how hospitals should have sanitation procedures, that idea shouldn't take 5 minutes. It'll take probably months to years to convey that information. That's the reason we have the education system. So yeah, if that's the purpose, it should take years, not 5 minutes. So yeah, depending on the purpose, it should take as much time as it needs, but not too much time. There are people who like, just sit around learning a one semester thing for 10 years. Yeah, and to connect it to the program, yes, we hope you'll help us find the answers, right? Not just what's the 5-minute answer to protocol bill somebody, but yeah, if somebody wants to improve, I don't know, policing protocols or firefighting protocols, what is the most efficient way to teach them that in a course? We hope somebody will help us find out.
Like all good answers, it depends. Okay, next one. Based on feedback over the past few years, what are some specific protocol concepts that non-technical individuals struggle to understand?
I think the definition is a big one. It feels very loose when you first start thinking about protocols. Like almost everything seems like a protocol and therefore nothing is a protocol and it's a vacuous concept. And I think once you get into it, the way you actually start to overcome that struggle and actually understand what protocols are is to start understanding what we think of as the phenomenology of protocols. So Nadia, for example, she wrote an essay called Dangerous Protocols, and she introduced this really clever notion of Kafka protocols. So think of the absolute worst protocol that you've ever experienced. What makes it so bad? Like, Kafka short story type protocol. The example all of us kind of like agreed was the worst was the TSA security protocol at airports. But this is not just an example to flesh out the concept of protocols, right? I mean, that's kind of like the dumb way to do it. Like you can spend 3 months fleshing out hundreds or even thousands of examples and like having tedious arguments about is this or is this not a protocol. I think what elevates this conversation is you come up with these more general lenses for looking at protocols, and Kafka versus what we call whitehead protocols, which is a good kind of protocols. That's a lens that allows you to not just draw a boundary, but say something meaningful about the nature of protocols, right? So we have a lot of such ideas. It's not yet at the level where we could call it a protocol physics or something. We're more at the stage of like, Kepler figuring out that the planets run in elliptical orbits, but we are still waiting for Newton to come along and invent a law of gravity for us. So yeah, those are the concepts that people struggle to understand and the ways you can get around the struggles.
Okay, and we have another one here with regards to the curriculum development program. What are you looking for in the curriculum development grants? Is it just being able to effectively deliver the content, or is there space for unique approaches?
I would say there is only space for unique approaches. Like if it's just delivering the content, it doesn't do anything. We have a whole bunch of material that's kind of researchy. It reads at roughly the level of like, master's thesis or PhD level writing. And yes, one way to do it is just naively go in and say, all right, how do I simplify this to undergrad level? How do I make a slide deck and just, put this out there in a very uninspired course? I think if you don't adopt a unique approach and like do some creative experimentation, it's actually kind of pointless. So very specifically, we do want you to come up with a unique approach. That's why we have this whole program. We're doing the week-long workshop. You'll work with other cohort members to argue over should we try to do this in an experiential way? Suppose you wanted to run a class on handshakes as a very toy example of protocols. Should you give a lecture that's of the history of handshakes, or should you have your students go into small groups and try out different greeting protocols and have a small group discussion on what makes a greeting protocol good, right? So that's the kind of unique experimentation that we hope you'll do and think about doing.
This wasn't asked in the chat, but a related question that I've heard a couple times is, what are the requirements for somebody that wants to apply to this program to develop course or develop a course module? Do we have any specific kind of background that we're looking for?
We do want some teaching experience, at least from my experiences with teaching. The first few times you teach a class, you're just struggling to even get through the basics of how to talk, how to work the whiteboard and things like that. If you're at that level, you're probably not ready to basically teach innovative new material. There's basic teaching skills of very well-established subjects. If you're teaching Stats 101, there's 100 really good textbooks on Stats 101, and there's tons of YouTube lectures of good professors teaching Stats 101. So you can just do that. There's no innovation required. But if you're diving into basically a new field altogether and trying to wrap your mind around how do I translate this to a classroom or an online course, I think you need some baseline foundational experience on being a good teacher to start with. And then you can ask, all right, how do I actually do innovative teaching around this? So experience is the one big thing, but we don't particularly care what kind of experience or what discipline, whether you're a political science professor or teaching an online course on productivity, or somebody teaching TCP/IP networking, we kind of don't care. So long as you have experience teaching and you enjoy teaching. There's plenty of faculty who kind of hate teaching and kind of see it as a burden. If you're one of those, please don't apply. We want people who actually enjoy teaching here.
Another one, which is closely related, asked by Unipuff, who is one of our Discord members, and by the way, is trying to organize a meetup in Germany. So if you're in Germany, join the Discord and tag Unipuff. How do you think we could integrate protocol studies in university settings? From my experience, being between the world of academia and tech, the speed and norms of each is very different.
We are, for the main curriculum program, we are targeting the university settings. So if you're talking about the tech industry, that's a different ballgame. If you're interested in that corner, talk to us about corporate workshops. That's in many ways an easier challenge. If you ask me to deliver a corporate workshop on protocols next week, that'll help managers and CEOs think about how to use that in their business. I could just pull it together in a week. And the reason is, when you're delivering that kind of immediately practical, usable concepts and methods to a working environment, people generally don't have either the patience or appetite to go deep and unpack foundational concepts, right? They're more all right, you guys have been studying protocols for 2 years. We have protocols around, managing power plants. Can you help us come analyze what we do and whether we can improve it, right? It's, in a way, shallower and more superficial, whereas academia is more you really want to spend the semester with some young person at a very early stage of their career, trying to install truly foundational ideas that will be valuable to them for their entire career, right? Think about a great professor you had in college who might have taught you concepts you still remember. Compare that to some random concept you picked up at a job that you've forgotten. I have several of those. There are jobs where I knew a concept for the 6 months I needed to work on something, but then I've completely forgotten. But there are lessons I've learned in undergrad classes that will never leave me. So that's harder. It takes longer. It's a slower kind of a rhetorical discipline. And that's one reason we want to actually give you guys time and funding to do that, because this is not something you can just half-ass. You really do need deep effort to make that happen. And yeah, it needs to unfold at the speed it does. And usually there's a reason college courses take a semester, not a week.
I think we've got one more big one here, and then if somebody has another one, we can probably do one more. From Andrew, are there any case studies of intentionally designed protocols? Have any SoP alumni successfully designed protocols that are actively in use? I think the answer is yes, kind of.
Yes, kinda is the answer. So when we did the protocol improvement grants program last year, we actually very specifically decided not to fund people who were trying to build protocols from scratch, because not only do you get a lot of pie in the sky proposals of like people's utopian ideas of how something should work, uh, that's kind of not it's missing the point, because protocols are almost the opposite of like startup products. They're not like, you invent it, it has like a faddish life for 10 years and then the company dies. The protocols we live with, some of them are centuries to even millennia old, and the really good ones, they might last thousands of years more. So you're like really playing in a very different horizon. And really the most important thing you can do with protocols is learn to recognize, understand, analyze existing protocols and try and improve them. And this does not necessarily mean it has to be incremental or that you can only make very minor changes and you're stuck with the past. You can make really radical, dramatic changes, right? Like if you're building a new city, like many of our pop-up city people are trying to do, like Esmeralda is going to be a new city on like basically 200 acres of nothing. You're going to have to at some point ask the question, should we design a new sewage system for the city, right? And here, sewage systems are not something you want to design from scratch with your clever ideas. You want to look at the 3,000 year history of sewage systems and just build on that tradition. And that takes a certain approach that's not the same as like, and here to criticize the Elon Musk tribe a little bit, first principles thinking, where you say, all right, I'm just going to wipe the slate clean and apply physics first principles and reinvent sewage systems from scratch. Sometimes that's the playbook to run. In the protocols world, we think that's often not the playbook to run. It's more like, Chesterton's fence. Like, why are sewage systems the way they are? Until you understand that, maybe you shouldn't like try to invent sewage systems. So yeah, look at last year's research. We have a lot of people trying to improve protocols, and they had mixed amounts of success. I'm not going to inflate that, because this is hard real world stuff, right? You want to change how wildfires are fought in California based on like hundreds of years of tradition, both Native American and modern. You're not going to overnight go in and solve the fire crisis on the West Coast. You're going to make minor incremental improvements, and even that's like something to be celebrated. So yes, we have SOP alumni who have done that.
Yeah, we have with one of our workshop organizers for Klongs and Subax pointed out that he advises students that you should never try and make a new protocol. The first thing you should do is try and find an existing one. Otherwise, you run into this problem where you're creating bloat.
Yeah. And since you brought that up, the name, the Klongs and Subax workshop, the reason we have that name is Klong is the Thai word for irrigation canal, and Subak is a kind of like community organization in Balinese rice agriculture that kind of cooperatively manages rice farming. So we thought that would be really interesting regional inspiration for talking about distributed AI and blockchain type protocols. And there's an illustration of the point I was trying to make, which is, yes, in some ways, AI is a very new technology, blockchains are a very new technology, and to some extent, designing effective protocols for those things are like clean sheet challenges. But in other ways, they're not. You look in the history of like human activity in any domain, you look at rice farmers, how they agree to share water, and you realize that they're actually doing many of the things that we think we can do with blockchains, and they'll actually laugh at you like you're an idiot if you suggest something really naive with like blockchain tokens to do what they do far better with like completely low tech, right? So that's, if you want to improve rice farming in Southeast Asia with like AI and like blockchainy things, you'd better go understand the 4,000 year history of rice farming in the region first. So Klongs and Subaks, so that's the inspiration there.
Yeah. Okay. Last one here. And if we don't get to your question, be sure to go in the Discord and ask it there. We'll be online for the rest of the day, answering questions asynchronously. From Von Tan. For the course development grants, how much interest do you have in courses aimed at executive education or aimed at senior public servants? This would be at the level of senior policymakers, not opportunities with concrete protocols.
Yeah, this would be amazing one. It's so there's multiple levels, right? Like you would want like really energetic young career people who will run around like inventing and improving hospital sanitation protocols, for example. But if you've got a 30-year experienced administrator who runs an entire hospital system, what's the most effective way they can adopt this kind of thinking? Yes, we would love to like make we've talked a lot about like protocol literacy, but a lot of what we've done has been at the level of like almost armchair intellectuals. We've started doing more at the level of practitioners. This would be at the level of like senior practitioners who kind of like oversee other people doing it. And you kind of have to be creative about this. Like even asking the question of like executive education at senior public servants, you're making assumptions about like, traditional hierarchical organizations where the vice president of something or the undersecretary of something is working on protocols. Imagine a future where those entire departments don't exist and it's like a P2P decentralized network. But even there will be notions like seniority, right? And people with a lot more experience than others. So I would encourage you to like broaden the understanding of what it means to be a senior professional in a highly specialized sector, with the viewpoint that 10, 20 years from now, your experience will still be valuable, but you may not be at the top of a pyramid operating a certain way. So you want skills that port across these kind of like organizational environments and milieus, right? So yes, we have the beginnings of things that work there. The tensions game that I mentioned, I think that's a great executive education tool. And yes, if you can pioneer and help develop more such tools, yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah, super valuable. And that's another area where corporate workshops would be certainly doable. So thank you everybody for joining. Venkat, any last words?
No, really excited to see where this whole program goes. So excited to meet all of you and run the program.
Yeah, that sounded super ominous, like we're about to get rid of you, but that is certainly not the case. So I will just do a little closing memo here for the recording, and I will see you all in the Discord. Thanks everybody for joining. That was the SOP 25 Town Hall. Check out the website for full information about this year's programming. Join the Discord to meet people, find collaborators, and chat with the program organizers. We're there all the time. And yeah, apply, share it with your friends. If you have academic friends, definitely share it with them. We're looking for warm intros. If you know somebody, send us an email at research@summerofprotocols.com with a little hello, and this is my friend so-and-so. We'll get back to them with curriculum development invite for the CFA. Thanks, everybody.